Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. Nathan spies Chase and Willow crossing the line, reports scandal to Dante. Nathan West may spy Harrison Chase and Willow Tate crossing the line. Will Chase's new partner report a scandal to Dante Falconeri? Since Anna Devane supposedly went off on some top-secret WSB mission, Dante has taken over her police commissioner position in the meantime. There's obviously more going on with hostage Anna, but the point is PCPD needs someone to fulfill this leadership role. Dante was the one who informed Laura Collins of Nathan's return to the force because he was in charge. Now Nathan has been assigned Chase for a partner, but Dante's special request could affect Nathan's upcoming storyline. Since Dante knows Chase has some blind spots when it comes to Willow Tate, he's asked Nathan to look out for Chase as well as keep him on the straight and narrow. In other words, Nathan's going to be keeping a close eye on Chase, which could spell trouble considering all these hints about Willow. Due to Chase's personal investigation and vulnerability toward his former flame, there are indications that his employment may be at risk. Fans were explicitly informed by the show that Nathan would be keeping an eye on everything, so what if he spots Chase crossing the line in some way? As Chase becomes increasingly determined to clear Willow's name, he may go too far and break some major rules in the process. Chase is getting awfully fixated on this and could make some blunders that'll cost him. It's even possible Nathan will catch a glimpse of Chase cheating with Willow at some point. Depending on how far the GH writers want to push things, Chase may be caught kissing Willow or entering a suite with her. Chase could make this mess worse instead of better for Willow if whatever helpful evidence he might uncover looks tainted because of their romantic entanglement. There's also the matter of Chase's marriage to Brooklyn Quartermaine, which Dante is certainly going to be protective of. If Chase breaks his marriage vows in the midst of all this, Dante may feel obligated to give Brooklyn updates. No matter what exactly Nathan sees, he may witness some problems when it comes to Chase. Nathan may blab to Dante after Chase crosses the line with Willow somehow, so both Chase's job and marriage could be at risk. Harrison Chase never expected his world to spin out of control so quickly, but everything changed the moment he and Willow Tate crossed paths again on that cold Port Charles morning, the kind where everything seems calm on the surface but trouble brews underneath. Their reunion was subtle at first, gentle smiles, soft nostalgia, and a pull neither of them dared acknowledge aloud, but the emotional weight was undeniable. Willow, worn down by uncertainty and fear surrounding the investigation tearing her life apart, found comfort in Chase's steady presence, while Chase, already struggling with unresolved feelings for the woman who once held his heart, found himself drifting dangerously close to territory he had no business revisiting. The tension between them thickened with every conversation, every charged glance, and every moment when Chase's professional obligations blurred with personal ones. Meanwhile, Drew Kane, who had been trying desperately to support Willow through her ordeal, found himself drowning in guilt the moment he realized Chase had stepped back into her life in a meaningful way. Drew's regret turned to quiet tears one evening as he confided in Carly, admitting that he feared he had failed Willow at the very moment she needed strength, not chaos. As Drew struggled with his own feelings of inadequacy, Nathan West moved into position as Chase's new PCPD partner, something that should have been a clean, hopeful transition for the returning officer but instead became the start of a storyline tangled with suspicion, concern, and moral conflict. With Anna Devane supposedly off on a top-secret WSB mission, and truthfully being held hostage somewhere far beyond Port Charles, Laura Collins appointed Dante Falconeri as acting police commissioner, leaving him responsible for upholding the department's integrity during a period already fraught with internal pressure. Dante, well aware of Chase's emotional blind spots where Willow was concerned, called Nathan into his office on Nathan's first official day back and delivered a special request: keep an eye on Chase, protect him from himself, and make sure he didn't compromise the case or his badge. Nathan, loyal and honorable but not naive, took the assignment seriously. He knew Chase had been spiraling ever since Willow's legal trouble began, and Dante's concern was well-founded. Willow Tate was Chase's Achilles heel, a soft spot that could topple his career if he didn't tread carefully. As Nathan and Chase began their first week as partners, Nathan noticed the signs immediately. Chase's questions about Willow were too personal. His drive to clear her name bordered on obsession. He worked late nights poring over evidence that wasn't even assigned to them. And he kept disappearing for long stretches under the guise of following leads. Nathan didn't want to assume the worst, but the more Chase tried to hide, the more obvious the truth became. Chase wasn't just helping Willow, he was becoming entangled with her again. The defining moment came on a Wednesday evening when Nathan, already suspicious after Chase slipped out without explanation, followed his partner discreetly through the Metro Court hallway. There, just beyond the corner near the private suites, Nathan froze as he spotted Chase and Willow standing far too close. Chase gently brushed a tear from Willow's cheek, his hand lingering longer than it should have. Their voices were low, intimate, full of unspoken history. Before Nathan could convince himself he was misreading the situation, the line between past and present shattered completely. Willow stepped forward, Chase leaned in, and for a split second, it looked as though they were about to kiss. Whether the kiss actually happened hardly mattered. The emotional charge between them was more incriminating than anything caught on camera. Nathan, heart sinking, already knew this was far more than a misunderstanding. Chase wasn't thinking like a cop, he was thinking like a man desperately trying to protect the woman he still loved. The problem was the case involved Willow directly. Any evidence Chase gathered could now be dismissed as tainted. Worse yet, Chase's actions jeopardized not only the investigation but also his marriage to Brooke Lynn Quartermaine, who had already sensed something shifting. Brooke Lynn had tried to be patient, tried to trust that Chase's commitment to Willow was purely professional, but the late nights, the evasiveness, and the emotional distance had already planted seeds of doubt. Dante, too, would be livid if he learned Chase had let his personal feelings interfere with his duties. The PCPD was already under scrutiny, and Dante had accepted the commissioner role to stabilize the department, not watch it fall apart. Nathan stood frozen in that hallway, torn between loyalty to his partner and loyalty to the badge he had fought so hard to reclaim. But Dante's request echoed in his mind, watch over Chase. Keep him on the straight and narrow. Nathan couldn't ignore what he saw. Not when Chase's career was hanging by a thread. Not when the department's integrity was at stake. And not when Willow's freedom could be compromised by even the appearance of misconduct. Later that night, Nathan arrived at the PCPD long after Chase had gone home. Dante looked up from Anna's files, brows lifting in concern when he saw Nathan's expression, stiff, uneasy, reluctant but resolute. Nathan didn't want to betray Chase, but the truth weighed heavily on him. We need to talk, he said, his voice low. Dante listened as Nathan reported what he'd witnessed, not dramatizing, not speculating, just recounting the facts. Dante's jaw tightened with each word. He knew Chase's heart was in the right place, but that wasn't enough, not when he was married to Brooke Lynn and not when his actions could get him suspended or even fired. Dante also knew he'd have to tell Brooke Lynn if Chase crossed the line, something he dreaded but understood was part of the job. Nathan walked away from the commissioner's office with a heavy conscience, knowing the confession might set off a chain reaction that would change everything. Meanwhile, Chase went home to Brooke Lynn unaware that the walls around him were already starting to close in. Willow, too, went back to her quiet apartment, replaying the moment she almost kissed Chase, knowing she shouldn't, but unable to stop her heart from drifting back to him. Drew, overwhelmed by regret and fear of losing Willow emotionally, spent the night trying to figure out how to step aside gracefully if that's what she needed. In the days ahead, the fallout from Nathan's report would shake the PCPD, Chase's career, and the fragile relationships tethered to Willow's spiraling crisis. Chase might believe he's doing the right thing by defending Willow, but Dante and Nathan know the truth. Sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from criminals, it comes from crossing personal lines you can never uncross. And now Chase faces the real possibility of losing everything, his job, his marriage, and the future he thought he had, because one moment with Willow may have cost him far more than he ever imagined. In the days that followed Nathan's difficult confession to Dante, the delicate balance of Port Charles began to shift in ways almost no one could see coming, though the emotional tremors beneath the surface were enough to signal that a major collision was inevitable. Chase, unaware of the report now looming over his career like an unseen storm cloud, doubled down on his private investigation into Willow's case, convinced he was the only one capable of protecting her from what he viewed as a corrupt and mishandled legal system. The more he dug, the more desperate he became, clinging to any lead, no matter how flimsy, that might inch her closer to freedom. He couldn't see that he was unraveling, stumbling into a void created not by criminals but by the unresolved love he thought he had long buried. Willow, for her part, kept telling herself that she needed Chase only as an ally, as someone who could help her prove the truth, but deep down, she knew the comfort she found in his presence was becoming dangerously intoxicating. Every time Chase showed up, sometimes unannounced, sometimes with a file in hand, sometimes with nothing but that quiet reassurance she remembered so well, Willow felt the walls she'd built around her heart weakening. She tried reminding herself of her life with Drew, of the loyalty he'd offered her through some of her darkest moments, but Drew's growing emotional distance, fueled by his belief that he'd inadvertently pushed Willow back toward Chase, made everything harder. Drew began spending more time alone, feeling like he was standing on the outside of Willow's world again, just as he had when she was drifting toward Chase years earlier. Carly tried to comfort Drew, insisting Willow still needed him, but the ache in his chest told a different story. He replayed Willow and Chase's reunion in his mind, tortured by the possibility that he had lost something he never truly had a firm grasp on. Drew blamed himself for not being stronger, for not being more perceptive, for not protecting Willow in ways that mattered most. He even wondered if Willow would be better off with Chase, though the thought hollowed him out. Meanwhile, Nathan grappled with the weight of his decision. On paper, reporting Chase had been the right thing to do. Morally, professionally, and ethically, he had followed protocol. Yet every time he stepped into the PCPD squad room and saw Chase laughing with officers, working cases, or casually chatting as if nothing were wrong, guilt gnawed at Nathan's conscience. He respected Chase, admired him as an officer, and genuinely liked him as a partner. But he could not unsee the vulnerability, the emotional recklessness, or the near kiss that now threatened to dismantle Chase's life. Dante, now carrying the burden of Nathan's report, struggled internally as well. The commissioner role came with responsibilities he understood all too well, but intervening in the personal life of a friend, especially one as loyal and dedicated as Chase, cut deep. Dante knew Chase was a good man, possibly one of the best cops the PCPD had, yet good men could make terrible mistakes when guided by conflicted hearts. Dante had witnessed it himself, both in others and within his own past. He couldn't help but feel protective of Brooklyn too. As someone who had seen her grow from a spoiled young quartermain into a woman fighting fiercely for her marriage, her career, and her sense of self, Dante felt an unspoken obligation to shield her from pain. If Chase had crossed a line, even emotionally, Dante knew the truth would devastate her. But truth, as always in Port Charles, had a way of emerging whether people were ready for it or not. While tension quietly simmered at the PCPD, Willow received unexpected news that threw gasoline onto an already blazing fire. A key witness in her case suddenly recanted their statement, claiming they had been pressured by a third party. Willow didn't know whether to celebrate or panic. It seemed like a victory, but the timing was too convenient. Too suspicious. Too connected to Chase's recent covert work. She immediately feared this breakthrough was the result of Chase pushing boundaries he shouldn't have crossed. The idea terrified her, not because she didn't appreciate his dedication, but because she refused to let Chase's future crumble for her sake. When Chase showed up at her apartment later that evening, eyes bright with determination and relief, Willow confronted him. "Tell me you didn't do anything illegal," she whispered, her voice trembling. Chase hesitated, and that single moment of silence told her everything she needed to know. Willow's heart dropped. She stepped back from him, her breath unsteady. "Chase, I can't let you destroy your career for me." But Chase didn't see it that way. He saw himself as saving her, protecting her, standing by her in ways he believed no one else could. He pleaded with her to trust him, insisting that what he'd done was within reason, but even he couldn't bring himself to lie fully. When Willow looked at him, really looked at him, she realized the truth was more complicated than either of them could handle. Chase wasn't just trying to clear her name, he was trying to save a part of himself too, the part still tethered to the love they once shared. Drew arrived moments later, unexpected and clearly upset, only to find Chase standing inside Willow's apartment with a closeness that made Drew's heart shatter. Drew didn't yell. He didn't accuse. But the tears in his eyes spoke volumes. "If this is what you want," he choked out, "just tell me. Don't string me along while you're with him." Willow insisted nothing had happened, but Drew walked away before she could explain. The emotional fallout worsened when Brooke Lynn found out Chase had been spending time with Willow, far more time than he ever admitted at home. She wasn't told about the kiss, or near kiss, or anything Nathan had seen, but the truth had a way of bleeding through cracks until it painted an unmistakable picture. Brooke Lynn confronted Chase with anger and heartbreak, demanding honesty. Chase tried to reassure her, swearing that nothing physical had happened, but Brooke Lynn, intuitive and fiercely protective of her own dignity, knew the emotional betrayal was already deep enough. "You don't have to kiss someone to cheat," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're in love with her, aren't you?" Chase denied it, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. Brooke Lynn walked out, refusing to become the woman waiting in the background while her husband chased another woman's freedom and affection. Meanwhile, Dante made the difficult choice to formally question Chase regarding the potential conflict of interest. Chase's shock was genuine when he learned Nathan had reported him. Betrayal twisted through him, not because Nathan had lied, but because Nathan had seen a truth Chase had refused to face. Chase lashed out initially, demanding to know why Nathan hadn't confronted him directly, but Nathan stood firm. "I didn't report you to hurt you," Nathan said quietly. "I did it because you're spiraling, and someone has to pull you back before you lose everything." Chase stormed out before the conversation could continue. He felt cornered, exposed, and completely alone, yet he couldn't deny that part of him knew Nathan was right. Willow, sensing the escalating consequences of Chase's actions, made a painful decision: she would distance herself from him until her case was resolved. She left him a message explaining that she cared about him but couldn't allow him to sacrifice his badge, his marriage, or his future because of her. This devastated Chase. After everything he had done to help her, everything he believed they were rediscovering, she was pushing him away. But Willow wasn't doing it out of rejection. She was doing it out of love, the kind that recognized when love itself had become dangerous. As days turned to weeks, the situation grew even more volatile. The recanted witness statement was called into question, and opposing counsel insinuated that a PCPD officer may have influenced the change. Fingers quickly pointed toward Chase. Dante tried to protect him, but the investigation grew teeth of its own, and soon Chase found himself at risk not only of suspension but possible internal affairs action. Brooke Lynn, watching from a distance, didn't know whether to fight for her marriage or let it end. She loved Chase deeply, but she could no longer ignore the fear that she was merely the backup plan to a love story decades in the making. Drew, emotionally battered, pulled away from Willow completely, convinced that stepping aside was the only way to avoid further heartbreak. Willow tried to focus on clearing her name, but she felt isolated, guilty, and torn between the man who had always supported her and the man whose love had once healed her, but was now tearing her life apart. Nathan, seeing the destruction mounting around his partner, regretted not handling things differently but knew there was no undoing his decision. Dante remained determined to protect the integrity of the department, but even he struggled to watch Chase crumble. Above them all, the shadow of Anna Devane's unknown captivity cast a sense of unease over the PCPD, almost as if the chaos within the department was mirroring the unspoken danger beyond it. And Chase, caught between his duty and his heart, stood on the edge of losing everything: his career, his marriage, his reputation, and the fragile hope he had rekindled with Willow. All it had taken was one moment, one nearly crossed line, for the entire house of cards to begin collapsing. But in Port Charles, the truth never stays quiet forever, and the fallout had only just begun. As the situation reached a simmering boil, the slightest shift threatened to send everything crashing down, and that moment finally arrived when Internal Affairs officially notified Chase that he was under review. The letter, stark and impersonal, felt like a punch to the gut. Chase sat alone in the PCPD locker room reading it, his hands trembling, the world around him blurring at the edges. This wasn't how he imagined things would go, not after everything he had sacrificed, everything he believed he was fighting for. He thought he was helping Willow, protecting her, doing right by someone who had once mattered more to him than anyone else, but now he realized he had been chasing ghosts instead of justice. Nathan found him sitting there, staring blankly at the paper, and for the first time since the ordeal began, Chase didn't lash out. He looked up at Nathan with exhausted eyes, defeated in a way Nathan had never seen. "You were right," Chase whispered. "I wasn't thinking clearly." Nathan sat beside him, torn between relief and regret, knowing this was a moment Chase needed, but one that still hurt deeply. Meanwhile, Willow learned about the internal affairs investigation through a whisper from a legal clerk who sympathized with her situation. The guilt hit her like a tidal wave. She knew Chase's troubles were rooted in his desire to help her, and as much as she'd tried to distance herself to prevent this exact outcome, the damage had already been done. She wanted to reach out to him, to fix what she'd unintentionally broken, but she also knew any communication with him could worsen his standing with the department. That night, Willow